Michelle Muscat says she criticised person who parked her car in a disabled parking space. PN reveals €6 billion vision for Malta, and several Nasha roads closed for election weekend. All this and more on Lovin Daily. Good evening and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. I'm Diacono, joined today by Grech Urpani, and stay tuned because today we're interviewing a very special guest, Jon Mallia, host of the Round podcast, the podcast Jon. We're going to be discussing many things, including his podcast, including the election campaign, and a new collaboration between Lovin Malta and Jon. So stay tuned. But until then, David, first story concerns Michelle Muscat.
Yes, so jumping straight to, political leaders of yesteryear. First of all, the whole thing started when Lovin Malta published a photo of the Muscat's private car, very fancy Land Rover Discovery if you ask me, spotted parked in a disabled parking space outside Marshall's Meeting Place, which is a building under the auspice of Marigold Foundation, of course the NGO that Michelle Muscat chairs. Michelle Muscat has since addressed the situation when speaking to Times of Malta, and she said that she wasn't driving her car. I mean, she was seen leaving the vehicle, but the car does have a private chauffeur, so implying that was the person driving the car. And she said she probably wasn't even in the car when the picture was taken, and she also said that she's asked the person driving not to repeat this action, which cannot be justified, and it's not what I and the Marigold Foundation stand for. It doesn't seem like it's the first time. In fact, the person who sent in this photo has said, this wasn't the first time that the car had used this space, and the person had grown tired of seeing it happen. Remember, this is, anywhere up to a €500 fine, following a legislation which, funnily enough, Joseph Muscat's own administration had entered.
Yeah, I mean, if you see political rulers or people of the political class abusing blue parking spaces and blue badges like this, please send them over to Lovin Malta, because this is a problem that people with disabilities have, and it's unfair that they're abused of by the people who are meant to be leading by example. Moving on, the Nationalist Party has finally published its famous costings of its electoral manifesto. A few days for the election, so it's not really much time to delve into the numbers and the feasibility, but these are them in a nutshell. €6 billion to be spent or invested in the next 5 years, ranging from €1.89 billion in long-term projects, and over and above a €2.8 billion in the trackless tram, €1.42 billion in an investment growth fund, and €2.6 billion in incremental spending. It also breaks down how it's going to create, or not create because some of them already exist, but enhance 10 economic sectors for Malta's future economy, which they predict will generate 32,500 jobs over the next 5 years, with an average salary of around €43,000. And they expect that the economy will grow by 2030, additional output of 13.6 billion between 2030 and today, additional gross value added of €5.3 billion. So yeah, very big numbers. Unfortunately, they published it quite late in the day, but it has to be said that the Labour Party hasn't exactly. They've done it before the Labour Party, and despite PL's constant criticisms of where is the costings, where are your costings, here they are. Like where are your costings?
Yeah, it's. I mean, as you said, they're very big numbers. I feel like Malta never really mentions money in the billions unless like election comes around. Like we're always in the millions. Like the second that the election comes around, the B word starts being thrown around. Of course, it's quite a lot of money. Hopefully, this is one of the last times I'll hear the word costings this year, because it has seriously done my head in. As you said, though, like there is a certain weird elements to the fact that like A, this is late, B, somehow still earlier than the PL's own costings. Of course, only time will tell, and there's not a lot of time left to see whether this is something that will affect Saturday's election. In fact, speaking of Saturday's election, Nashar is perhaps as expected, but maybe not ideal for certain residents, going to be a little bit of a logistical infrastructure and parking nightmare, because parking restrictions are hitting at least 9 roads. It is perhaps to be expected, especially for the Saturday election, but this new slew of regulations will actually come into effect on Friday morning at 6 a.m. So, a full day before election kicks in, and will keep on being effective until 6 p.m. on Sunday. So that is pretty much the entire weekend locked out there. We have everything from the X-Straight Fairgrounds, which is 100% to be expected, but you also have a number of roads, including Piazza Chelsea, Triq il-Kappella tax-Xara. Check them out all on lovinmalta.com. Deviations will be there by police on site. Of course, some residents have been confused, some have been angered, some have been saying, it's a great inconvenience, no one knows where to park. But police have, answered all of these concerns and said this is strictly a standard procedure to ensure the security of residents. They even said that, listen, the area will need to be, kept clear in view of patrols by Malta's armed forces as well. I mean, let's be clear, this is a general election. You don't want, people coming in and out of the area. At the same time, Malta has already had quite a lot of problems with congestions and parking, as is on a normal day. So I would suggest that unless you really need to, maybe avoid Nashar this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, I can't because I live in the vicinity of it, but so parking might be a little bit of a hassle. But as you said, I mean, it needs to happen for the sake of security. At the end of the day, this is a general election. It is the most delicate and sensitive part of the democratic calendar, and yeah, there should be maximum security to safeguard the process. Another early development in the counting process concerning independent candidate Arnold Cassola, who staged a sit-in protest at the Nashar voting hall, at the counting hall yesterday, for around 3 hours, just over, after he was denied access into the area which examines the dubious votes. So this is a controversy that erupts every 5 years. You have when you vote, you have to give preferences 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on, and the agents of the political parties will be looking at them like hawks to see if the 2 looks a bit like a 3, if the 5 looks a bit like a 2, and whether they should be therefore marked as dubious. Cassola wanted to take part in this process. Fair enough on him. He is a candidate contesting with neither of the parties, and he was refused. And anyway, after the protest seemed to have worked, and he was accepted after 3 hours. So unfortunately, sometimes you need to just impose some pressure, and it works. But yeah, good on him.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, as expected, the comments were, a little bit of a mixed bag of everything from this is just absolute clownery to this is what Malta needs, someone who just stands his ground and says, listen, there's no reason why I shouldn't be allowed this access. Here's how I'm going to get it. And I mean, if it means sitting down 3 hours on that cold floor, which he himself said, is what it takes, then I mean, exactly, I go on Cassola. It has, of course, as Tim said, not been the first time that there's been, issues like this, and it will definitely continue, but we'll keep you posted. As far as the dubious votes go, if you yourself have any doubts on, how you should make sure that your vote is valid, because there's always, that mix-up of just in case you don't write a straight line, your 1 might be seen as a 7 or might want to be confused as that. Check out Lovin Malta's Instagram post, which was posted just over an hour ago, where we specifically explain how you should be writing them down. Basically, don't go fancy. This is an election, it's not about calligraphy here. It's just as simple as possible. Straight line for a 1, no curly squiggly lines for numbers like 2 and all that. Check them out on Instagram and you see all of that. Meanwhile, well, much larger numbers than just 1, 2, or 3, 50,000 euro in cash and nearly a kilo of cocaine were seized in 2 separate drug raids in Msida and Halfar. This was announced by Malta's anti-drug squad earlier today. Actually, 3 people were arrested in connection to the trafficking and even production of illegal drugs. It all started on Monday in Marsa Shlock, where a 51-year-old Italian man using a building in Halfar to traffic drugs was apprehended. They found 10,000 euro cash on his person. As these drug raids usually go, the operation was followed up, and then a building in Halfar was searched. They found a little less than a kilo of drugs, along with another 40,000 euros, so that's 50,000 in cash. And then, 2 other people were arrested, a 49-year-old man from the Dominican Republic and a 24-year-old Spanish woman. Various objects were seized in relation to the manufacture of cocaine, so pretty much a whole operation there. Quite a lot of coke, quite a lot of cash.
Always astounds me how much coke there seems to be on such a small island. It shows there's quite a market for it, I suppose. That brings us to the end of the first part of today's edition of Lovin Daily. But stay tuned, because we're going to be interviewing Jon Mallia, host of El Podcast Jon, in just a few moments. Welcome back to Lovin Daily. With me now is Jon Mallia, host of the famous podcast Jon. Jon, thanks for being here today. So, Lovin Malta and you have a long-standing relationship, and now we've reached an agreement on further collaboration.
Yes, exceedingly excited. I consider, always have, even though I'm no longer employed with Lovin Malta, I consider Lovin Malta kind of part of the extended family of the podcast ta' Jon. Dejjem kien hemm rubija u biberija, u nirrispetta ħafna dak li intom tirrappreżentaw. La coach machine. And yeah, we decided to, I don't know, let's go with English. We decided that we're going to continue to collaborate and deepen this relationship.
So yeah, more details will be out soon, but we're very excited for this latest collaboration. Obviously, your podcast has been going on for around a year now, just over a year. There's also a documentary happening about it now. So, first of all, what was your favorite moment throughout the podcast?
That's so hard, man, because I really think that most people have some insight to, like, and I didn't start out this way. I started out thinking like not too many people will have interesting things for me to take and learn from, and so on and so forth. But what I've learned is that when you pay attention and you really give a shit about what people are telling you, and you really try to build upon what that person thinks, so like you can really have very interesting conversations. So it's really hard for me to pinpoint. I guess like one of the Mason episode I loved. I loved the Matthew Grech episode. Ġiri ma' Matthew Grech kelli taħdida ta' 4 sigħat, ma qbilna fuq kważi fucking xej. Imma għamilna 4 sigħat, naħseb li kienu rispettużi ħafna, l-ħastra li eventwalment iġġilidna jena u Matthew pubblikament fuq il-listja Facebook ukoll. Imma t-taħdida ta' Matthew għalija kienet dak kollu li xtaqt il-podcast ikun, ġifieri, tnejn min nies li ma jaqblu xejn, ma' xulxin. Fuq ideoloġikament ġifieri kongruenza zero. Imma b'mod rispettuż qegħdin nixtarru l-inkongruenzi ta' bejnietna.
It's kind of easy, right? To, like nowadays, to just block out the opposing thoughts and the opposing arguments and just stick, I suppose, to your own bubble and your own beliefs.
Mhux hekk, I mean, we have a prime minister that's a master of this at this point. Le, mhux hekk. Like, you know, like it's so upsetting, man. Two of the biggest entities of this country, you know, hats off to Bernard Grech, ġi fuq il-podcast, saqsejtu dak li kelli nsaqsih, ma limitani fuq xej, u kellna t-taħdida. Imma dawn l-entitajiet għandhom bżonn, ġifieri fil-fema tiegħi, tant għandhom seta' u din is-seta mhux dejjem ħaduha bl-aktar mod leġittimu. Li qegħdin f'punt li daw is-seta tagħhom jiena nħoss li għandhom obbligu li jużawha biex jgħinu jemanċipaw lin-nies partikolarment meta niġu għal-ħsib kritiku. Ħsib kritiku jinbet minn da xorta ta' dialogu.
No, exactly, because otherwise it's just speaking to the converted, speaking on one and no one challenging you, right? So you can't really get this critical thinking. So Bernard Grech, you said you interviewed him for like around 2 hours long, right? The interview?
Yeah, I was given 2 hours to all of them home.
Yeah. And you extended the same interview, because I saw some people asking, like, why are you interviewing Bernard Grech and not Robert Abela? But you had requested an interview with Robert Abela, right? And what?
Yeah, no, I requested an interview with Robert Abela multiple times, through WhatsApp. I spoke to his comms, we spoke to his chief of staff, Glenn. We made a public appeal for this guy to come onto the podcast. And, I don't know what the strategy is here. I don't know if they want to, if the idea is to try to label independent media as being biased to the PN just because we're critical of government, which is, like, if you watch the podcast, if you really watch the podcast, you understand that it's bullshit. Or they just do not want to have meaningful conversations where they're challenged at a deep level. Because obviously, I mean, Tim, they're ahead. They're ahead by a huge margin. So what's the payoff for them to be challenged?
You think though it is actually something that might be going on to their heads, where they say, look, let me refuse to give a single interview to the independent press, so that when they only interview the opposition, we can easily say, look how biased you are.
Listen, the narrative is out there, right? The narrative is out there that we are biased.
But first of all, there's nothing wrong with bias, right? The whole point is...
Sure. So, I agree with you entirely on this. So, I have a bias. My bias is informed by my value structure.
Yeah.
Right? It's not informed by a party. It's not informed by friendships. It's informed by a set of beliefs that I have that I feel should govern human interactions, including my relationship to the state. Right? Mm-hmm. So I do have that bias. And when you start infringing on that, I have issues. But yeah, I think entirely, like, there is that narrative out there, and it doesn't help that we didn't have the leader of the PL, and these people know, like, we talk in private. They know that I'm not biased. They know that dialogue is needed, but for some reason, then when it comes to the crunch, they don't put their ass on the seat and have this discussion. I mean, we wound up getting I was happy I did it. A former prime minister, we got Alfred Sant on to have a discussion with someone from the other side. Great, deep, meaningful, academic discussion, but that's not the people that's not the leader of the party that people are voting for now, and I think those conversations need to be had in a democracy that believes itself to be European.
Yeah, so you don't think that you're not the only one who the Prime Minister refused to accept an interview with. So we've, like, even Lovin Daily we've been requesting an interview with him for a long time now. And again, he hasn't refused, he just hasn't bothered answering.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Joseph Muscat accepted, Bernard Grech accepted, like many of the Labour Party has accepted as well. So what do you think this is? Because my feeling is there's this fixation, right, on the part of government to control the narrative as much as possible. And when there's an interview with an independent body, it's unpredictable. Therefore, there'd be unpredictable questions and there could be unpredictable responses.
Yeah, so first of all, it's fucking nuts that we're, like, the independent media is getting more airtime with a deposed former prime minister than we are with the actual prime minister. That's crazy in the context of a democracy, first of all. Secondly, of course, if you're the head of the PR of any party or political entity, you want to try and control the narrative. Of course, that's your job. You want people to ascribe to the narrative that you're putting down there entirely. But not having to me, to anyone that's a free thinker, to anyone I'm not even like, I don't want to pitch myself as some apogee of critical thought, but to anyone that wants to analyze this, the fact that the Prime Minister refuses to have a discussion with the independent media is just simply not on in a modern democracy.
What did you ask him if you could?
Roberta Bella, oh
Yeah.
wow, man. You know what, Tim? So the problem is this, that many times, the problem with that question for me right now is that many times I seldom have the questions that I'm going to ask this person. So I would have a couple of chapters, but where I would start with Roberta Bella is I would like to understand what his value structure is. What do you believe in? Do you believe in honesty? Do you believe that there shouldn't be thievery between the state and its citizens? So first I would articulate like the basement, the Sisian
What makes him tick?
of what makes him tick and what he believes in. And then I would try to understand if his behavior is congruent to his value structure. And that's how I would approach it. That's how I approached it with Bernard Grech. That's how I approached it with many people. I really care about why people do things rather than what they do, because then I understand like the motivations behind what they're doing.
What do you think of Bernard Grech then? So you did ask him this again. What makes him tick? Do you think he was being genuine and honest, or was it just a political show?
It's evident that, look, as human beings, we all have very similar values. We all have very similar beliefs. We know right from wrong. Even if you're fucking Robert Musumeci and you can morally relativize to kingdom come, you still understand what a better form of human interaction is. We all get that. The difficulty is when you get to a dilemma where it's expedient for you to divorce yourself from your value structure. Now, the part that disappointed me with Bernard, and I was abundantly clear with him when he was sitting at the podcast desk, was when we had the Christi da Buono discussion. Because at that point, like, okay, so you believe that we shouldn't have people in office that have, stolen from the state coffers. You believe that, in integrity, so on and so forth. But then you're not willing to tell me, or you're willing to tell me that had Christi not removed herself from the ballot sheet herself, you probably would have kept her on. I think those two facts are incongruent with one another. I mean, that didn't make sense for me. But a lot of other stuff did. I mean, at least he turned up, mate. At least he turned up and had the conversation,
And also took some random questions. I mean, there was the one that you had picked out of a bag, right? And it was like one out of 6 or out of 12 or something. And the question was, which two Labour politicians do you admire the most?
Yeah.
I don't think he was expecting. It was completely random. Right?
Yes, those are completely random questions from our Patreons, right? Because are you familiar with our Patreon?
Yes, yes, I am familiar.
Community,
Yeah.
and I'm taking from the glare in your eye. You're not a Patreon.
I
Tim.
am a Patreon.
You are a Patreon,
Yes, I
Tim? Shit. All right, white and naked. Yeah. So Patreons get to ask our guests the questions they would like to ask. Obviously, since we didn't have time, as you can imagine, we had 40 questions. We had time to ask a few. I don't remember the number. And no, obviously he didn't have a look, man. No one that comes on our podcast has any say into what I ask them. There are parameters. For example, I remember a particular guest said, "Listen, we can talk about anything you like, but don't bring my family into this." Like, first of all, it goes against my honor to do something like that. And those kind of parameters I'm happy with. But when it comes to things that are of pertinence, absolutely nothing is off the table.
If you had to interview one person besides Roberta Bella, who would it be?
Roberta Metsola. I mean, can you imagine what it's like to be the president of the European Union, to be woken up in the middle of the night to hear, listen, there's tomahawks or whatever flying into Ukraine? Can you imagine the level of responsibility, how serious your political role has suddenly got as at that end? Plus, it's an interesting story, woman. This woman made it from being a girl from Gzira to the highest echelons of European politics. The woman, and again, this has nothing to do with party. The woman fucking represents. So,
There's a part of that you missed out on of Roberta Metsola story, which I find the most fascinating, is the fact that she failed twice. It's 2 election campaigns. So she contested two other elections before she made it into parliament. So she failed to get elected twice. So I think it's quite an inspirational story.
Yes, that's the hero's journey. The hero's journey in the way that writers study it by Joseph Campbell. You have to have what we call the pit and the worst of the worst. She had both. She failed twice, but that shows you the type of backbone this woman has. She got knocked out twice, stood back up, and knocked all of us out.
So finally, there's going to be an election in a few days' time. Many observers have noted that this campaign has been relatively calm compared to previous campaigns. It's also the first campaign without debates on TVM. It's been relegated to TVM News Plus, no Sharabank. Do you think, just first, how I'll get your thoughts on the campaign itself and why you think it was, do you think anything stood out or impressed you most? And whether this sterilizing of TVM contributed to the fact that this was a calmer and more tepid campaign than usual?
All right, I think one of the things that contributed to this being more tepid than usual is the fact that we kind of all know what the outcome is going to be. I'm presuming. And that's like if, like Milan played in the afternoon and I tell you, don't tell me the score because I want to watch it tonight, but you tell me, Legio 2-1. So now I'm no longer excited to watch this game. Also, I think, I don't know, you know this thinker called Slavoj Žižek?
Yes, I know.
I think he's Lithuanian, he's constantly doing that.
Left wing.
Exceedingly left wing, but makes very good points. I don't know why I said but, like left wing people can't make good points. Of course they can make good points before I get attacked by graffiti on my way out or something. But yes, Slavoj Žižek presents this theory. He calls it the Santa Claus theory, where basically every child at a certain point, not every child, but many children get to a point in their existence where they realize that Santa Claus is false, right? But it still pays them to pretend that Santa Claus is not false, right? Because if they can play along, they're still going to get the presents, right? So, and that can last for like 1, 2, 3 years. And I think we are dead in the middle of realizing, listen, these guys, like they say one thing and they do another. They say they have our best interests at heart, but at the same time, they're pocketing so much money that should have been invested elsewhere. Like so now we are pretending to be part of this charade, but the more time elapses and the more we participate in the charade, the more we begin to be dissuaded to participate, right?
So we know like what's happening, but no one's ready to change their behavior in that sense.
Yeah. But we know what's happening, and we still play along, and we still go to the mass meetings, and we still clap when enough the party leader says, we're going to have a brighter future that's going to be transparent, and the environment is going to be first. Like we haven't been hearing this for fucking 40 years, bro. For 40 years we've been hearing it, and for 40 years they've been neglecting the environment. So I think now we're at the point. Like for sure the younger people that I speak to, they're so disengaged by this partisan politics. Let's remember, we're in an era where we are no longer forced to consume our media from the 2 major parties. Right now you have the internet, so people are understanding. The game is up, bro. The game is up, huh? The game is up. Like it's only a matter. I give it one more legislature until we have a third party that's going to give these guys a run for their money.
that's quite a bold prediction, considering, and I'm sure many people in third parties were happy to hear that. Jon Mallia, thank you so much for being with us here today. Made some very interesting points, and once again, looking forward to our collaboration with you.
Tantiħor, Timotju, ħabib tiegħi, kemm nistottolinja, keep watching the space, because
thank you for following Lovin Daily. Make sure you follow lovinmalta.com and have an evening full of lovin'.